Alrighty, welcome to the Excitable Soul Podcast, everybody. Here we're interested in all things purpose. We want to know where and how people find meaning and connection in their lives. In every episode, we will be hearing the real life stories of how people have uncovered, understood, and unleashed their own unique sense of purpose. Our hope is that we can all learn from the journeys of our guests so that we can all better find a sense of purpose in our own lives. I'm host James Glover, performance coach and purpose nerd. I'm incredibly excited to be exploring these stories with you. So let's get going, shall we? So, ladies and gents, welcome back to the Excitable Soul Podcast. With a difference, we have invited Rebecca Irving back to the podcast because, well, it's still the most listened to and most played podcast of all of those that we did. Yay! Mainly because I think it was excruciating for both of us, and people out there just, enjoyed our pain. And we are having today the first of what we're going to call the kitchen table conversations, which is, so Rebecca Irving is actually, my younger sister. I think we covered that off last time around as well. Well, we can debate all of that too. If you want to bring people into that conversation, no problem. And we grew up around the kitchen table. All of the big family decisions were made around the kitchen table. All major conflicts fought around the kitchen table. Lots of love and pain and moments of significance shared around the kitchen table. And what we want to bring into these conversations is just us openly sharing how we're trying to get our brain around some of the things that we're trying to bring to the world, and maybe share some of that thinking with you guys and get some feedback from you on what you're hearing and a little bit of a steer. So it's going to be pretty open, and we genuinely have no clue how it's going to go, do we?
No, I've got some feelings, and that's what I'm starting with.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling defensive. I'm feeling aggressive. I'm feeling like I'm going to call you some names. That's my starting point.
Shit. All right. So we thought it's January 2025, and people are out there going, right, new year, new start. There's an entire book written by Dan Pink around when, which is that, kind of moments and timing matters for us as human beings, and that we can press pause or we can press reset. And we know that many people out there in January are doing exactly that. And we both have been wrestling and continue to wrestle with how we look after ourselves, our well-being. And so we've written a blog on the website, check that out, plug for the website, about the why of well-being. So where does purpose connect and intersect with well-being? And so we thought we'd start with that today. The irony being that both of us have kind of felt rushed, felt under pressure, have sworn more times than we can count just trying to log on to the platform this morning. And the fact that you are angry, the fact that you're triggered, probably sums up like that January feeling of well-being to some degree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So where do you think we start with this, Beck? Like what does January and a kind of a reset represent to you?
Pain, disappointment, failure. No, I mean, I joke, but there is an element of that, right? So it was interesting because I went back and I read your blog just to remind myself of where you might be coming from.
So already cheating. when we weren't going to prepare and we were just going to get on, already cheating.
Don't start calling me a cheat. This does not need to be turned into Christmas games. You never look good in that situation, do we? So back up, James.
Okay, fair call.
They can adjust the volume, right? And
I think we need producer John to step into that for sure.
No, so interestingly enough, right, I totally take the point. The reason that I'm defensive is ultimately I don't like being on the losing team. I feel as though, like, fundamentally, I can come up with, and I genuinely don't think that they are excuses. There are times when you have excuses for not doing things, and I obviously have done that in the past a lot. And there are a lot of people that use excuses when actually you just need to make a commitment and go. But my defensiveness comes, I think, from the fact that we talk a lot about where you put meaning and using your purpose. But if your purpose feels as though it conflicts with putting yourself first,
Yeah.
then it muddies the waters between where you should be applying your time.
Yeah, I love that.
Also, in your blog, you talked about, and this is my point to hold on to.
Ladies and gentlemen, she's going early. She's playing her cards early. Shit or bust, 5 minutes into the podcast.
You talked about physical, emotional, and mental, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm winning at 2 of them, then you can't give me shit for not getting to the gym. So this is me being daft. So like realistically, I feel like I'm fighting for everybody that doesn't look like a hot Jesus like you do.
Hey, wow. Look,
you
she was kind to me, ladies and gentlemen.
enjoy that. And I hold on to the fact that you haven't always. So you had a turning point. You were a bigger man, and a happy bigger man. Like, I have thrown that at you in the past. Like, you were a happy fat man, James. And your response was, well, actually, I wasn't, which was a bit of a, oh, right, okay. Then there's an element of sort of mental attitude to that. And you made a shift at some point, which I will ask you about. And obviously you had a purposeful moment there where you went, actually, what's my why for doing it? And then it changed for you, like, before everybody's eyes. And you've been on a journey that leads to all my friends fancying you. Like, that's where it's gotten you. And, you know, personal fulfillment and all the other stuff. More that you're going to throw back at me. But I feel like every element of my life is a juggle. So work's a massive juggle in all of my jobs. You know, family is a massive juggle. And within all of that, my well-being feels like a massive juggle, because there's this fitness thing that I do want to do, especially since feeling crippled since last summer, but also making time for myself to listen to stories that aren't based on work, because I get joy from that, and actually spending proper quality time with my children where I read things that they're excited about, like bedtime isn't a battle. Them, you know, my purpose statement is to creatively captivate so that people feel seen and inspired, which means that idea of other people feeling seen requires investment, and I feel better for it. So you kind of go, if my well-being is nailing that, being in line with that partially, then that also feels conflicted with the time it takes to get my ass to the gym, you know?
Yeah,
and
I
then
love it.
adding on that, not being very well, or, you know, something popping up, or feeling like me doing it means my husband can't do it, and whose needs are greater.
Yeah.
And commitments to stuff. So I kind of go, yeah, my defensiveness comes from, it's not just excuses, you know, like they're genuine tensions. And also I have this 3-month thing where I do really, really well and hit things hard for 3 months, and then it falls apart. And if it falls apart with exercise, it just goes, right? Like, you're no longer fit. You've put loads of weight back on, and you're like, really? You know, it just seems harsh.
And we're back at pain, disappointment, and failure.
Exactly. Yeah, so I talked at you quite a lot there, but that's my main. I went in hard with my main argument.
Yeah. I feel like we're in the courtroom, and you just set out your position, and I'm gonna lay down the gauntlet and walk out. You win. See you later. Jokes, as if.
That's right.
As if. And actually, I don't feel like you've laid down the gauntlet. I don't feel like this is an argument, and that we're on different sides of the argument at all. And those that are listening and not watching, the disappointment on Beck's face is evident. What do you mean we're not going to battle it out? Are you joking? And I think that's because you've just really eloquently and beautifully articulated the tensions that most adults are facing in their lives, and that the pull on our time and attention, the pull on our focus, whether that's physical, emotional, or mental, is massive. Oliver Berkman, in his book 4,000 Weeks, I think, has done a really, really good job of being able to paint the picture. Like, 4,000 weeks on average is the number of weeks that you have in your life. And he's saying that often the argument is made that you have these choices, these choices, and there are big choices and there are little choices, and it's the little choices that get in the way of the big choices. And he's like, it's total horseshit. Like, it's not like that at all. There are enough big choices to overflow everybody's cup. So if there are enough big choices to flow everybody's cup, you don't even get distracted by the little choices because you can't keep up with the big ones. And so that then just makes things even more difficult because there's a cost associated somewhere to some degree. And I was listening to a kind of a well, I wasn't listening actually. I was watching a clip of Oprah and Michelle Obama, and they were just kind of saying, "Hey, look, you can have everything you want, you just can't have it all at the same time." You're like, whoa, yeah, cool. These are two of the most impressive human beings on the planet, and if they're giving out that advice, let's all pay attention. So there is just something about what you're laying out here in terms of the complexity and the difficulty and the tension that people feel, and then what happens if we don't meet our own expectation. Disappointment is unmet expectation, and if we're setting a whole bunch of expectations we can't meet, then at best it's disappointment. In actual fact, it's all the things you described: pain, failure, and then it becomes just another thing we've got to deal with, which is the voice in our head going, yeah, you can't do it.
You sent me a really good podcast last week or 2 weeks ago, and I'm hoping that you're going to remember who it is, but it was talking about visualizing your future self, and the studies that have been done that suggest that the better the connection to your future self, the more that you invest in that. And I found it fascinating for a couple of reasons. A, for the work that we do at the Excitable Soul, but also for understanding myself a little bit. And there were things in that I also disagreed with. That if you can't visualize yourself, then you are more likely to cheat. And I see you smiling. You keep that comment to yourself, because that's a family trait. So it's got nothing to do with our future selves. Anyway, and I felt actually there's a bit of belief in there. There is being able to see your future self, and then there is the believing you can get there, or believing that you could ever be that, or feeling like you deserve that. There's a whole load of emotional attachment or feelings towards that, where you kind of go, I see what the future could be, but I can't physically. The steps seem too big, It's and at the moment, the future self of next week is looming over me more than the future self of 15 years. That when it becomes priorities, and I think back to the grid that people used to make you do, which is, the what's important, what's not important, what needs to be done now, what can be kicked down the road, right? So that to help you prioritize on your list of things to do. Well, I see him perpetually in the really important needs to be done now, right? So, and that takes away from this visualizing your future self and what you need to invest in for the future. It's not that I don't think that it's important. Of course it's important. And I think the turning point for me was when we had I think a harsh conversation when we were on holiday, but true. That's probably why it hurt, because it was true. So I found myself in a lot of pain over the summer. I'd wrongly invested in barefoot shoes, or the cheap alternative to barefoot shoes, because my foot hurt, right? So it started with my foot hurting and thinking that it was because my shoes were too narrow. Took advice from my husband, always a mistake.
Renowned podiatrist.
I these barefoot shoes. So I was like, I'll go all in. I bought these barefoot shoes and I wore them constantly and did not do the research, which means you do not go straight into doing that. It completely changes how you stand and uses loads of muscles that you haven't used, because I don't walk around barefoot, never have done, right? So I found suddenly that now not only did my foot hurt, but the rest of my legs did, and my knees did because they've got dodgy knees. And in my enthusiasm to build a wall and do my landscaping in the Easter holidays beforehand, I'd given myself carpal tunnel and something else. So I was like, my wrists hurt, my knees hurt, my calves hurt, my foot still hurts, and I'm not wearing narrow shoes. And everything swelled up, and we were on holiday, and I was like crying, hobbling over to your camp to be like, and your response, lovingly, you'd obviously had enough of me whinging, was just like, you don't look after yourself. You know, you don't strengthen those things. You don't. I don't think you mentioned eating properly, but it was implied in the general. You're not looking after yourself properly. Like this is, and that's when you started talking about part of your purpose for being fit is that you want to be there for your children. You want to be able to be throwing them around, to run alongside them, to do all of those things as I'm there, like not able to sit down or get up properly. And that was a turning point for me because I was like, I can't kick the can down the road anymore because the effects are now. Like I can't move properly and therefore join the gym. But sustaining that is, I feel like I'm back at the beginning because I made progress and felt like I'd made progress, not in my weight, but strength-wise, I certainly felt like I had, and I wasn't hurting as much. But then hiccups come, right? Like, again, you have to focus on something else because that becomes a priority, or you kind of go, actually, by investing in myself, I'm not seeing the kids, or I'm not doing X, Y, or Z, or I'm getting up ridiculously early to do it, and it's like you can only sustain that for so long because you can only keep cutting away at your sleep for so long, and then right at the beginning, so it becomes a repetitive cycle. So the dropout rate for people who start going to the gym and do really well is huge because it only takes one snag or one pulled muscle or one whatever you, and you are effectively back at square one.
I don't know whether you guys caught it, listeners, but Beck's reframed definition of success was in what she just shared there, and there was a lot in what you just shared, but there's a couple of bits that kind of stuck out for me. So the first thing about vision of future self, if we start there, vision of future self, I totally agree with you that dependent on what your vision of the future is, it has an impact on how you feel today. Equally, you have choice over the vision that you create for the future because it's not happened yet. And so there's something in what is it that you're projecting forwards? What is it that you're projecting forwards into? And you're also right in that I've invested in that work really heavily. So I have this very, very clear image of myself 80 years old. My 80-year-old self is skiing down the side of a mountain with grandchildren. Now, there's a lot of things between now and 80 that might stop that from coming true, right? My children may choose not to have children, or they may not be able to have children, and either of those things is completely fine. The bit that I can control is, should they do that, do they want to come on holiday with me? Do they still want to be around me? And so if that part of the dream is going to come true, then my relationship with my kids is really, really important. There's an element of this really, really critically, which is if I'm skiing down a hill at 80 years old, I need to be physically capable of being able to ski down a hill at 80 years old. Now, if you've ever been to a ski resort, you see all of the locals who are 80 plus whooping it down the hill because they're physically capable of being able to do that. So that I know is possible. There's another element here which is slightly outside of my control, but I'm becoming more and more committed to doing the bit I can, which is there going to be snow in the mountains when I'm 80 years old? Like, genuinely, that dream can't come true if we've totally destroyed the planet. And there's a financial element to that. At 80 years old, do I have the means to be able to take my children and my grandchildren skiing? Just as a total aside, I even know where I'm skiing, right? I know where I'm skiing, I know the run that we're doing, and I know where I am on the run in relation to my grandchildren. They're kicking my ass down the hill. I'm like going as hard as I can, and I can't keep up. Like that's the experience I'm having, and it's a beautiful, bright day, and I know, like I can see it. I can see it really clearly.
Where am I?
Huh?
Where am I in your vision? Where am I?
You are behind me, obviously.
Throwing stuff, right?
Yeah, cheating on me a little bit, and I'm comfortable with that because you're behind. It's like, so, so there's a bit of that which is I used that, right. I use it, and I have used it, and I've used it for over 10 years now on cold mornings when I've like wanted to get up and do exercise, and I've used it in moments where I have fallen off the wagon massively and I'm hating on myself, and it creates a pull to make a different choice. It's not the be all and the end all, it's not the only thing, but it definitely helps. So there's something in that. There's also then something about consistency in what you're describing, and like, oh, I'm really good for 3 months, and then it doesn't happen, or something happens, and I can't remember the quote at all, but there's two that are whipping around in my head. The first one is that real gains are just made by incremental shift and change. Right? People overestimate what they can do in a year, and they underestimate what they can do in a lifetime. That's Warren Buffett. I know that one. And so if you're like, oh, this year I'm going to get jacked, and then and actually you don't, and you don't even get close, what you're forgetting is that anything that you've invested in that year could actually help you get to the point where you're incredibly fit and healthy in the later part of your life where you're going to really struggle. So we're human beings. This is the second quote. Very good good friend and colleague of mine who works in like Gaelic, loves Gaelic tradition. They're a coach, and they do a huge amount of embodiment work, and they're like right into to Gaelic tradition, and they're brilliant at being able to quote this kind of ancient wisdom at me all the time. Kerry Cullen, by the way, is the lady you should check out for this, and I'm totally going to bastardize what she said, but ultimately, there is an old Gaelic saying about us like falling off the wagon. It's kind of where the kind of the origination of the falling off the wagon comes from, and like to err is to be human. We're not going to get it right all of the time. Like, but if you fall off, can you get back on? And you don't even have to get back on, um, and like go beyond where you were before. You just got to get back on.
Yeah.
And every time you fall off, at some point, get back on. Because every time you do something in any of these areas, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's mental, or really, way more importantly, spiritual, like that's why we do the work around purpose, because it's kind of connection to meaning. The more you invest in that, the better off you're going to be. And really interestingly, your definition of success that you kind of gave, and I don't know whether you noticed, was you talked about being in pain, right? And the amount of pain that you were in, and then you made a change and you were pain free, right? And the bit that was like contrary was like, didn't make any difference to my weight, but I was stronger. You're like, well, don't put that in there as a marker, because actually you were in pain and then you weren't. Like winning, 100% winning.
No, I agree, and I think like listening to you and listening to you talk about your 80-year-old self, it's just kind of apparent that I haven't done enough work on it. I can't visualize what I want at the moment, and so that isn't a big enough pull, obviously.
But also, just to come back to another point that you made, like let's come back to the kind of the work to be done bit, because that's quite interesting. But the tensions, right, and the pull of tensions, and you talked about like the kind of the sense of purpose was really about creatively capturing people, and the impact of that is them feeling seen and valued, and like inherently then the focus is outwards. And that's magical, because when you do that, people feel the magical effect of you doing it. Yet there's not going to be enough of that in the world if you don't look after you too. And so there's something about where, like in my vision of the future, it doesn't have to believe in others so that they can believe in themselves and make more things possible. Like You know, what's my belief in others as I'm flying down the mountain? It's squarely me hoping I can believe in myself and not like rupture a hip ligament or something, because at 80, that's going to be a bad time. But there's something about that future state, which is me having lived that, and what's then the outcome of it. And how does it help me hold the tension, which I don't get right all the time. Like, this isn't a right versus wrong or doing it versus not doing it conversation, which is why I wanted to say, like, we're not in the courtroom. Like, I have made progress, yes, and that is because I've found a way to make it really, really important to me. And also a big part of that is my wife, is Josephine.
Your wife's your better half, isn't she? She's
Listen,
incredible.
now stop trying to score points with my wife.
Right, I'm trying. Like, it's all true.
We know who your favourite is.
As long as you do, James. As long as you do.
Yeah, and I say that because, you know, I don't live in a vacuum, right? I don't live in isolation, and it is important to her too. And we went through a really rough time when we first became parents about trying to understand what the other person needed, and we got it so wrong, really, really wrong. Especially me, doing a whole bunch of things that I thought was useful and important, and that, you know, that she needed and valued, and none of it was the case. Literally none of it. And actually, the second that we kind of stopped and talked to one another about what do we need to be, who we need to be in the world, like, it changed the relationship with a whole bunch of things. And one of those is the kind of the exercise element of the way that we live our lives. That all being said, right, regardless of your situation and circumstance, there is just some physiological facts that we can't get away from, which is your body is the vessel that you exist in this world within, and it requires some upkeep. we can't get away from that.
Yeah, I feel like this year or last year was the turning point where me serving my purpose, me living my purpose, started to bite me in the ass. Like,
Yeah.
like creatively captivate. Partially, you know, we talk about I do that in service of others, but I also massively do that to exercise my brain, right? The emotional and mental side of well-being for me is problem solving. It's
Yeah.
creating something. It's
Yeah.
creating a nicer environment for myself and my family to live in, that I can invite other people that I love towards. It's about finding a way of doing it that isn't going to cost me. The price is to get people to come in and do fitted wardrobes, right? Because that's my current problem. So I've always made things, and I get a lot of pleasure out of developing a new skill and doing it well, and sitting back and going, I did that. That's
Yeah.
really good. Because it's the only time where I praise myself, if I'm being honest, when I've solved a problem.
Yeah.
I've learned something new and I've created something awesome. And now it hurts to do those things, you know, like, it's realizing that in order to do my purpose, this huge part of my personality, I need to do some physical stuff, otherwise I'm not going to be able to do it forever. So there is this, I'm striving to be this 80-year-old version of myself that I clearly need to do some work on, but also just to do the things that I know I get energy from.
Yeah.
I can't just take anymore. Like, I have to do something to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
And it's been what felt like a right up until now. As far as my understanding of myself goes, I am dyslexic. I'm pretty sure I've got other neurodivergencies that are undiagnosed.
Yeah.
Very
Undisclosed other neurospiciness.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they affect the people around me. My husband could tell you anyway. But I've always felt like the things I struggle with, that I just have to work hard at that to get where society expects me to be able to cope. But these things about learning to learn and creating something, that's the payoff, right? That's the part of me that goes, all right, I'm not great at that stuff that everybody else finds interesting, but this is how I contribute. Look at how I can create and do this and whatever. And it's always been but that's my right.
Yeah.
I struggle at all of this stuff. This is right. And now it's kind of going, it's also a privilege. And if I don't do the exercise, if I don't do the reformer and the pain and the all of that malarkey, I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm already finding that I'm shying away or I'm stepping back, and that actually the lack of the physical is slowly creeping in on how I look after myself emotionally and mentally, because I can't access the stuff that I've always assumed I can do.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think you're highlighting something here which is really critical for us all just to pay attention to, and is a real marked distinction between you and I. Like, I am much more of a physical animal, and you are much more of a mental animal. Like, we laugh a huge amount at my inability to do anything DIY related, and it's a great source of abuse for everybody else in my world. But there's an honesty here, which is, I don't care. Like, I don't care. I don't want to do it. Like, I don't get, when you so eloquently and beautifully describe that kind of sense of fulfillment and satisfaction at being able to build a brick wall around a pond, and to be able to kind of landscape your own garden and create something which, by the way, everybody, is beautiful. Like, it is absolutely beautiful. I don't care. Like, I'm not going to get the same level of satisfaction and fulfillment from achieving that. Like, it's going to be draining, like deeply draining. However, give me the opportunity to go wakeboarding or play hockey, or like any like go to the gym, or like any of that. I'm in. Like, I'm in 100% in.
That's where I think life is not fair. Sorry to interrupt.
And so let me finish. Good Lord, didn't even get there. But there's a reality that we both share, right? Regardless of those two things and the difference between those two things, there's something that we both share, which is, all right, I liked a lot of physicality from a very young age, played a lot of sport, and I've had back surgery. I had back surgery 6 years ago, right? So not even 40. Got metal plates in my back and removed discs. So for all of that, let's go do some stuff. I wasn't doing it very well, and there's some fairly significant health complications. So
enthusiasm over technique, right?
100% all the time. That includes dancing and drinking. But if you think now, we're in the same boat. Like, if I want to do the things that I love and that I enjoy and that I get energy from, there is a foundational level of physical activity that I need to do in order to be able to function in the world. And for you, there is a foundational level of physical activity that you need to do in the world in order to be able to get to the stuff that you really care about. So for both of us, we're both facing into the same challenge, which is, we're human beings, and like our physicality requires nurture.
Yeah. And I don't disagree with all of that, and I have a massive amount of accountability. But where it's not fair is that you get energy from doing it.
Yeah.
And I don't. I very much so feel like going to the gym is like donating blood, right?
Yeah.
The process of donating blood, being stabbed by a needle, that's not pleasant. But you feel really smug afterwards. Like, I saved a life. What did you do today? And I feel somewhat similar when going to the gym, right? Like, no, don't enjoy actually doing it. I laugh a lot, but that's it through
pain being expressed.
Yeah, it's like, or I can cry. Positive pants.
Yeah, and I'm about other people, and I don't want it to be awkward, so I'm going to laugh.
Yeah. And I need my tears. I can't dehydrate any more than what, like, the exercise provides. Yeah, I can't remember my point, but
the fairness.
It's unfair. So in that sense, like, I think it requires more mental effort for me to get out and do it, because I'm not going to go, yes, let's go to the gym, because I'm not interested. I like afterwards.
Yeah.
I went to the gym. I like, though, how earlier you talked about redefining success. Like, actually, I haven't weighed myself throughout the I've fallen off the wagon. Let's just be honest. Since just before Christmas, and getting back onto the wagon has been problematic. But
it's a really high wagon. Do you know what I mean? Like, to jump on the back's tough.
Like it's gotta be you or my other
There's no
brother.
step there.
I was doing really, really well, and I was proud of the fact that I was doing really well. So it's about getting back into that, which is doable.
It's 100%, 100% doable, 100% doable. I think you also kind of touched on something really significant earlier on, which is the kind of the happy fat man phase, and the kind of the realities around some of that. Like, yes, I am more of a physical animal than you, but that doesn't mean that I find it all easy, because it's not the case. Like, it is. I'm really struggling at the moment. I especially with food. Like, I know that boundaries are really important to me. Like, if I don't have boundaries, the wheels are off, man. Like, I can consume some stuff, and so it's really important for me to put boundaries in. But whenever I put boundaries in, you come under kind of scrutiny, because people are like, "Why aren't you doing this? And why aren't you doing that?" And I know that that's not about me, but at the same time, you're still coming under that kind of scrutiny and having to kind of fend that off. Plus the fact, like, I love crisps, I love beer, and I love bread. Like, I could quite happily eat crisps and bread all day, every day. And so you try and instigate the boundaries, and that's this like when thing. I'm like, right, it's Monday, boom, we're getting back on it. Like, I know what this looks like, I know what this requires, I know what this takes. I've been there and I'm ready and I'm in it. And I get to 4 o'clock in the afternoon and I've been amazing, and then I go, all right, fuck that.
Well done,
And
me. Where's the
yeah,
crisp?
yeah, exactly. Woohoo! And the kids aren't eating prawn cocktail crisps anymore, and so they need eating.
Yeah, I mean it's a waste otherwise. And
Exactly, it's a
you talked
total
about saving the
waste.
planet, and that is part of saving the planet.
Yeah, definitely, definitely food waste, and any other of the 4 billion excuses that I can come up with really, really quick. Like, at the moment, the bran flakes are taking up way too much space in the cupboard because the kids are really into their cereals, and we need to be able to kind of get more of the stuff that they like in. So I really need to eat those with lots of raisins just before I go to bed.
James, if bran flakes and raisins are your guilty pleasure, then we can
No,
stop.
no, they're not my guilty
No,
pleasure. They're just excess. They're just excess, like, feeding. Anyway, I think the point is that there was a huge period of time where I was deeply unhappy and hadn't fully understood that, and that I have a decent sized ego when it comes to how I look. And you calling me hot Jesus was nice for that ego. Like, my chimp enjoyed that.
That's even better.
You are sorry?
Hot Jesus. You just said that's
Oh
even
no, wait,
better.
have you gone back to food? Is it all about cheese now?
I love cheese.
I love cheese.
Yeah, just I like how you popped that
that,
back in.
so
I
that, so
remember
there's
when you called me hot Jesus.
I have a healthy ego about how I look, for sure, and as strong an ego as anybody else associated with other elements of my life, but one that can be easily overridden by doing the things that make you feel good and keeping you pain free. And so for a really long time, it didn't feel like it was okay to be me. And partly I didn't understand what it was to be me. I just knew that I was having a bit of an allergic reaction to myself, hence the fat bit. And the second that I started to confront some things about who I wanted to be in the world, how I wanted to be in the world, what I just needed to accept about who I was, regardless of what other people think, and then be able to just make really, really small steps in making that happen, life changed for me. And it swung violently, right? I went from being massively overweight to then being in the British rafting team and training twice a day and getting in really great shape. And then it went strength overplayed, in that we went from 6 people in a boat to 4 people in a boat. And the other 3 guys that had kind of really secured their spot were a solid 15 kilograms lighter than me, because they were all canoeists and had no legs. And I've got Beyonce booty. And so, like, it's not even like I could blame the 15 kgs on having broader shoulders and bigger biceps to help move the boat. It was carrying weight that wasn't healthy. So I was like, I need to, and if I want to be in the boat and I want to be contributing, and I really do, I need to be lighter. And that led to a whole bunch of really disordered choices around food that then lasted for a long time. So finding the kind of the healthy balance in all of that, purpose has been really important, because we unashamedly are about people going on an emotional journey. and taking them to a place of reflecting on moments that have shaped who they are. And some of those moments aren't happy moments, but they are meaningful moments. There's significance in those moments, and understanding those moments of significance and seeing those moments of significance in the continuum of life choices to now, and then in the continuum of what life choices could come in the future, all of a sudden you can start to make sense of them in a different way, and you can intentionally connect with them in a different way, and it starts to just make more things possible. But you have to feel it. Like, you have to feel where there is alignment, or where there are gaps, or where there is conscious awareness and intention, or where these things are playing out completely unconsciously and, kicking you in the ass. But doing that work and shamelessly committing to do it in an emotional way enables the meaning part of purpose to come to the fore. And then it becomes easier to make the contribution, because then almost every daily choice around action can be in service of it one way or another, even if it's not clear. Like, I want to creatively capture, okay, but I need to physically be capable of creating stuff. Okay. What does that now mean for me? Like, the way that you just expressed that, in that it felt like a right, and now I realize it's a privilege. Maybe that's going too far. Maybe it's not a privilege. Maybe it is just your right, but to access that right maybe requires something different.
Yeah, I feel quite that was quite a cathartic conversation, really. I definitely came in defensive, and I thought about it. So if anything, working with the Excitable Soul work has made me reflective, and has made me kind of go, actually, like, one of the biggest things that you introduced when we first started sort of unpicking things together was Brené Brown's work about vulnerability, and that was painfully eye-opening for me in lots of different ways. And since then, I've kind of gone, actually, we all have different armors, and I put this particular armor on. So when I feel defensive, I kind of go, well, why am I? And I'm far more open to the conversation, and I'm open to telling the stories, and I'm open to sort of talking about it. So I think, starting off by going, or even the pre-thinking to this conversation and going, well, why is it that I'm defensive?
Yeah.
Those are the questions to ask. You just kind of go, we talk over and over again about purpose not being a stick with which to beat yourself.
Amen. Preach.
And it really isn't. And if you feel like you are doing that, then you've got to ask yourself why, right? Like,
Yeah.
what is it that you are feeling or attaching shame to? Because really nobody else is putting it on you. And if they are misunderstanding what you need
or just don't need to be around. We can get rid of those people.
I mean, not always, James. Yeah, so sometimes the conversation is worth having, especially with the right person. Because I don't now think I'm going to go to the gym later, because I'm not, but but I might tomorrow. And I have already in my head gone, I know it's routines. If I've got my bag ready on the night before, when my alarm at 5:15 goes off, then I just have to get up and leave. And it's that. Just get your bag the night before. That's your first step.
Yeah. It's there's just something really really straightforward here, which is you've done it. You've done it. You know what it takes. You know what it feels like, and therefore you can do it again. And that's this kind of incremental consistency of, I can find my way back, and sometimes finding your way back just requires a bit of help. I think for everybody out there who's listening, who's in their own wrestle, in their own head, in their own way, like what's the smallest first step towards this? John Gomes, my friend and mentor, and just like wonderful force in the universe, just says, what's your lifeline to these things? What's the smallest amount possible that you can do on a regular basis that just keeps you connected to it? Because then it just lowers the threshold of resistance to kind of getting back into it. And there's genius in that. And maybe we should just pause the conversation here and leave people just reflecting on, what's your lifeline to whatever you need from a well-being perspective, and who can help you, and what might that mean in terms of you being able to connect with a deeper level of meaning and significance, so that it becomes a force, a driving force for you to get to wherever you need to get to. Thanks, Beck.
Thanks, James.
You rock.
I know.
we might invite you back as long as you don't start with the courtroom of I'm going to lay out my case and I'm going to beat your ass in this.
No, you can't change who you are, James.
Yeah, true story. You lost.
What?
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Excitable Soul podcast. We appreciate your support and would love you to subscribe, rate, review, and recommend if you can. It makes a massive difference. Equally, if you're interested in uncovering, understanding, and unleashing your unique sense of purpose or that of your teams, come and explore our purpose immersion programs at theexcitablesoul.com. We look forward to hearing from you there or being with you on our next episode. Have an incredible day.